No? Well, this next one, for the professors, this is also another thing that isn't, I don't think, all that common for accepted students weekends like this. You have a lot of time to maybe like receptions and that kind of stuff, but seldom do they actually put on a panel like this where you can ask them questions. And I thought this was a good idea, A, because these are the people that are going to be giving you grades, so you might want to have some questions for them. But they're also, believe it or not, human beings. They are people with interests and hopes and dreams and things like that. And I think it's really helpful as students to know that about your professors and to know where they're coming from and to see them that way. And so that's why I set up this panel. So when it comes time to question time, again, feel free to ask them anything about, what's their best student, what separates their best students from the rest of the students, why did they get into teaching, that kind of stuff. Well, those are my filler questions, so I guess you can take them. I'm giving them to you, and I'll come up with other ones. But this is a really great opportunity that a lot of law schools you wouldn't really get. So I am going to start. I like to have folks introduce themselves because I think they do it better than I could do it. So your name, what you teach, and and why you became a professor. I think that's a good one. So I'm taking that one back. So who you are, where you're from, what you teach, and why you became a teacher.
Okay. My name is Rishi Batra. I've been here at Tech for now this is my second year here. I teach a variety of courses. I teach the first year property course. I teach a course in intellectual property. I also teach the negotiation workshop. And that's based partly, all of those are partly based on my background and my research. Where am I from? Oh, I'm from California. Grew up mostly in San Jose. And so I'm a little bit far away from the beach and from, the water, but there's enough sand around here. There's got to be some water somewhere. And, oh yes, why I became a professor? I knew I wanted to be a professor actually going into law school. I mean, I was hopeful that I could be a professor. I love teaching. I love working with students. I particularly love working with 1Ls. I like seeing people go from not knowing something to really just having it click. And one of the amazing things about particularly your 1L year here particularly is that you will really get, we'll throw a bunch of stuff at you, but by the end of your 1L year, you will be amazed at how much better you understand the law and the world and cases and how the legal system works as a whole. And it was always amazing to me, particularly for my own 1L year. By the end of my 1L year, I thought about the world in a completely different way. And so I love helping 1Ls, guiding them through that process.
I'm Tracy Pearl, and I teach the first year criminal law class, criminal procedure, and I also teach environmental law. And this is my first year at the law school. My husband is a professor here as well. He teaches property law and water law. I'm from Honolulu, Hawaii, so I'm very far from home. And I also knew that I wanted to be a professor coming out of law school. I taught an undergraduate class on my school's campus during law school and fell in love with teaching. And being a professor is the best way for me to stay engaged with students and to continue reading and writing, which are the things that I love the most.
I'm Chiapinelli, and I teach in the business law curriculum. I teach things like business entities and securities and mergers and those sorts of things. This is my third year here at Tech. Before that, I was the dean of the law school at Creighton University Law School in Omaha, and before that, I was 20-some-odd years at Seattle University as a business law prof and associate dean there. I'm originally from Southern California, and I got into teaching because I love helping people teach themselves to be lawyers. And I love thinking really deeply about the legal system.
All right, thank you. I'm Professor Wendy Humphrey. This is my 8th year here at Texas Tech School of Law, and I myself am a graduate of this law school, so I highly encourage you to come here. I am from kind of the Tampa Bay area and New Mexico, so family in both places. And I became a professor not like most. I was a practitioner in Amarillo as a partner at a law firm, and I received a phone call, and they asked me to apply, and I thought, well, that is a great combination. I used to be a 7th grade teacher. I have a master's in education, so it combines my two passions of education and law.
See, real people. Legal research and writing is what she teaches.
Oh, yes, that's a good thing. Teaching legal practice, we cover everything from writing, research, alternative dispute resolution, contract drafting, appellate advocacy, professionalism, everything.
How to use commas? How to use commas?
And how to, proper punctuation and grammar.
Do your grading systems work? I mean, I've read that sometimes there's one grade at the end of the semester, sometimes there's the end of the semester grade and a midterm grade. How does that work for you guys?
Yeah, cash or check, PayPal? How does, do you have a preference?
Toss them.
Yeah, Square?
I think that it varies from class to class. In my classes, I usually give 3 substantive quizzes during the course of the semester so that students are able to evaluate their progress and whether or not they're on track. And then I give a very large final that's a significant part of the grade. But I think other professors do it differently.
For me, it varies by my classes. I teach, in the first year course, I do the very traditional one exam at the end for a variety of reasons that I can go into. For my intellectual property course, it's mostly an exam at the end, but I do have a significant portion where the students have to present about a recent case, and based on that presentation, that factors into their grade. My negotiation class is completely different. It's based on your participation in the program and your reflection journals and some of the outcome of your negotiations, and so there's, it's much more a participatory, interactive, immersive experience, and so I try to grade on all of those aspects. But generally, my thought is always, what is it that I want the students to be focusing on, and then I think about the grade, how do I grade around that question?
Oh, I'm relatively traditional. I have 3-hour finals at the end of each of my classes, except my seminar in advanced business, and then the students do a presentation and they do a 5,000-word paper for me.
And the nature of the legal practice course is a little bit different. We have smaller courses because of the amount of work with writing. And so along the way, and I should say, we actually have the same students in the fall semester and the spring semester. And along that way, we are able to give you feedback for various assignments. Some are writing assignments, well, the majority are writing assignments, but we also do have multiple choice this semester for alternative dispute resolution. But there's assessment occurring throughout the semester at different levels.
Hi, my name is
in
Sarah.
course.
My question is, beyond choosing a law school to attend, if you had any advice on maybe how to prepare for law school, anything from really specific to just general?
I don't always have to go first.
No, go ahead.
Okay, apparently I do have to go first. Preparing for law school, it also, partly I think it just depends on kind of where you are in your, if you're an undergrad, continue, don't drop your grades just because it's your last semester. I think a lot of people worry a lot the summer before law school about, should I be reading this or should I be taking some sort of pre-law thing? Is there anything I can do to get ahead? Honestly, take that summer before law school. This is this personal advice. Everybody can disagree with me. Catch up on your Netflix queue, watch a bunch of TV that you weren't going to watch otherwise. If there's some fun reading you want to do that, if there are novels or something that you want to read, do that. Don't stress yourself out too much because there's going to be plenty of stress 1L year. And so spend some time just relaxing. If you have time to go on vacation or if you can afford to just stay by the pool for a while, definitely take a little bit of time off. Give yourself a little bit of a mental break because you're going to go in and you're going to be working hard. And if you're already tuckered out from a bunch of stuff you tried to do over the summer, that's not going to be helpful.
I completely agree. I think that there's an entire industry out there that preys on the fear of people who are about to go to law school. And I personally don't think that you should give them your money because I think that the value of those sorts of programs and books is dubious at best. But the one thing that I think that you can do is mentally prepare yourself. So the best advice that I got before law school was to treat law school like a full-time job. It means getting to school at 8:30 or 9 in the morning, getting to school and starting work, not Netflixing or checking your email or getting up, being at school working at 8:30 or 9, and then working until 5 or 5:30 at night. And that means working and not texting or emailing. It means being disciplined. And if you do that 5 days a week, you will be in incredibly good shape. I think there's a very high correlation between discipline and success in law school. And so I think if you can get in your mind before law school that that's going to be your schedule and you can be committed to that deeply and execute that from the first day, I think that you will be in such good shape for most of the semester. And so I think just sort of taking time to really commit yourself to that type of discipline will reap tremendous rewards. But beyond that, I agree. Catch up on Netflix, go to the beach, spend some time with your family.
I think one thing to remember as you're coming to law school is that law is really a social institution. It really comes out of what society is doing. And so in terms of sort of prep, I think about what it is you know about the world and the sort of areas that you don't, and sort of look at the other areas, because your judgment as a lawyer, whether it's as a private practitioner, whether it's somebody in government, somebody doing nonprofit work, whatever it is going to be informed. Your judgment is going to be informed by your view of how the world works. And so the more you know about what's going on internationally, nationally, politics, business, social things, the more you know about those things, the better your judgment will be.
My answer is a little self-serving because I do teach legal writing, but you do legal writing in other classes too. So while you're relaxing, read a grammar book, read a punctuation book.
That goes without saying.
Yes.
I think that was understood.
But be reflective about who you are as a person and a writer. If you know you struggle with comma usage, if you know you don't know how to use a semicolon, take that time to start honing those skills, because it will help you in your legal practice course, but in all of your courses. And a recent study, I believe it was by Barbary or ABA, both employers and current law students viewed the strongest, most important skill that they learn in law school as being legal writing. Of course, that includes a lot of other skills, legal analysis and many other things, but if you can start working on those skills, and it could be, it may have been a very long time since you have had someone actually assess your grammar and punctuation and use of thesis sentences and eloquence and all of that. So if you need to work on that skill, might as well get a jump start on it.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
I'll actually give one word of warning back to the books. If you just can't help yourself and you have to go by some of the pre-law books that summarize a given topic, those can be dangerous as well. I've had somebody every semester in my 1L classes that has read some sort of study guide in advance and then felt overly confident about the material. So when we get to a topic, they'll think, proximate cause, I know all about this, and they'll just sort of tune out. And what frequently happens with those people is they get to the exam and they know the 10,000-foot view very well, and they may even know the 5,000-foot view very well, but they've missed a lot of the subtleties and the nuances, and that's really the difference between a B student and an A student in law school. So if you can't help yourself and you must read one of these books, just remember to approach the material humbly when you do start law school, and not to fall into that trap that sometimes people fall into when they buy those sorts of books.
Yeah, I think you'll find, my experience, because that's a pretty common question in a lot of places, and a lot of schools you might even receive reading lists and that kind of stuff. The academic support people that I've worked with and the books that I see recommended most often are not subject matter books. They're not books on contracts, they're not books on criminal law. They're books about how to approach the first year of law school and what kind of mindset to be in it. One of the books that I've heard recommended several times is called 1,000 Days to the Bar Exam. The guy's last name is Tonsig, like Tonsig. It's like a paperback. It's like $20 or something like that. It's on Amazon. It's real cheap. But a lot of it is just, okay, look, this is what they're looking for in exams, or like this is the way to prepare for class in a way that makes you prepared to be called on when they ask you the questions, right? You can't just read and then highlight and think that you know it well enough to answer hypothetical questions that are not in the book, you know what I mean? And so it's frame of mind stuff. It's not substantive knowledge. And most of those books, Getting to Maybe is another book and both of these books, they're like this thick. They're not with pretty big print. You know, they are books you could read at the pool and that kind of stuff. So just keep that in mind. Those are a couple books that I've heard of. But again, you're not going to get a head start on law by reading a contract.
It seems to me that the law has language of its own, and it takes a while to understand what that language is, how to appropriately use it, what context to use it in. From your 1L students that you've had, how long do you see that it takes for this comfort level to kind of come into place with the student?
3 years, usually. Actually, no, because I'm still at it and I'm still learning. No, you're exactly right. It is like a language, and it really, I mean, sometimes law school does feel a lot like learning a foreign language like Spanish or French, and particularly in property law, which I teach, there's a lot of just magic words. There really are. We actually use, I have some, I teach some of the oldest law we have, and so I'm sometimes talking in Latin and all sorts of weird stuff, right? So there really is a language aspect to it, and I mean, it's hard for me to say that like there's one particular, like they get it in 2 months or 3 months. I mean, hopefully they get it before the first set of exams, at least for that subject. But I'm not kidding when I mean 3 years or 6 years. I mean, there really is a fluency with the law that you get, just like you would if you move to a foreign country and you learn that language. And so we give you a deep immersive experience. It is like a language lab in some sense. And I see my second semester students have much, and Wendy can speak to this in particular because she sees people over the course of the entire year. You get even between December of 1L year and May of 1L year, there's such a huge jump in progress, and I see it between my 2L, my 2Ls get so much better between, especially because some of my students, God knows why, it takes me more than once, I see their fluency increase between their 2L year and their 3L year, and I think it is just something you get better and better at. It's not like one day, they wake up and yes, I get it.
But I do think that's a really good question. I actually do think I taught in the first year for years and years, and you're right, there is a little bit of a process. You get it every day, but I think in terms of acculturation and internalization of the process and the language, there's a huge jump between the end of the first year and the fall of the second year. The second years come back, and for somehow, some way, they've internalized it in a way that the preceding April, when they're finishing up their first year, they almost have, but not quite. And I think it's just a magical thing that happens for most of them in that gap.
I agree, and I think that there's a very traditional notion of law school that we just start on the first day and, somebody opens this dusty book and we just start spouting law. And I don't think law school is taught like that anywhere anymore, and it's certainly not at this law school. So, when I teach first semester 1Ls or even second semester 1Ls, I go really slow the first couple of weeks, right? What does it mean? What is a legal opinion? What is it that we're reading? What's a dissent? Why would you write a dissent? And so we move very slowly to help that acculturation process and to help students adapt to what it is that we're doing, because it would be profoundly unfair and counterproductive to just start teaching law like everybody understands what it is that we're talking about. But I agree. I think there's a very big jump between first year law students and second year law students.
And to add what they've already mentioned, family members, significant others, those of you in here that are not thinking about coming to Texas Tech, your law student in your family, their vocabulary will change, and you'll have no idea what they're talking about. And non-law school friends that you have, when you are out with them, I'm talking to my future law students, you will start talking in a different language to them as well, and they won't know what you're talking about. So there's just something about, once you learn it, then every facet of your life is about law, which I love, but yeah, it's a whole different world.
I have a question. Several of you have taught at other law schools. And can you talk a little bit about maybe how, because everybody said it before, that the faculty here is sort of special and different, and I think it's because it's true. Can you kind of explain why that is? Because I get a lot of questions from students, and they usually assume that law schools are the same in some ways, and that's one of those things, well, all law faculties sort of are the same, and it really doesn't matter. Can you sort of talk about that a little bit, about your other experiences in here?
I'm the newest faculty member, I guess, on the panel, and so my husband and I are coming from another law school that I will not name for reasons that will become apparent quickly. And it was a great law school. We had amazing students. It was a positive experience, but there were a lot of faculty members who came, taught their class, and went home. And so on any given day, out of a faculty of 25 permanent faculty members, not adjuncts. My husband and I and 2 other faculty members were the only people there during normal business hours. It was really just the 4 of us holding down the fort. And what we absolutely love about being here is that all of our colleagues are here every day with their doors open, and it's such a profoundly different experience. I mean, not only are all of my colleagues here all of the time, the students are coming in and out of our offices. There's a much, much greater flow between faculty and students. There's more engagement between those 2 groups of people. And so that's been incredibly heartening for us. It's definitely the type of law school that we want to be at, and I think that it's a tremendously beneficial sort of environment for students.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, and having the faculty around and be engaged with one another, of course, is useful from a student point of view in the sense that they're there when you go by to see them. But let's face it, you can use email, and people are pretty responsive that way. They don't necessarily need to be in the building. But I can tell you, just as Tracy said, in terms of the vibrancy of the faculty, the engagement of the faculty with what they're doing, with their enterprise of legal education, it's so much healthier here than it is at other schools where really they come in, they teach, they go home. I've been at 2 of those schools. Yep.
If I can just add to that, along faculty culture, this is my 3rd law school that I've taught at, and 4th, I guess, if you count my own law school. And more here, and maybe you can agree or disagree with this, but here more than any other law school I've ever been at or even heard of, the faculty really, really think deeply about the student experience. We spend time talking about how we're teaching. We spend a lot of time meeting and actually thinking about, hey, how can we increase student engagement? There's whole conversations in the hallway and official and during our faculty retreats. They're all about the student experience, and it is there's more of a concern for students here than I've seen at any other school I've ever been at, and it's amazing to be part of, because that's one of the reasons I'm here, is because I care deeply about the student experience. But this faculty, from the most experienced tenured faculty member that has absolutely no incentive really other than their own caring to actually spend time with students, all the way down to the most junior faculty, all really seem to think about and care about and worry about how are the students doing, how can I improve my student engagement in my classroom, how can the students be doing better as a whole. And so there really is a concern and a caring for the students here that I've never seen at any other school.
Hi. What is y'all's perception and experience with the type of camaraderie between the students here? Do you see competitiveness, or is everyone helping each other? What do you look for when trying to form study groups and things like that?
I think inherently in any law school environment, there is some competitiveness, because that just comes along with going to law school. But I do think that different law schools have varying levels of that competitiveness. Here, although students are competitive, I think that our students get along very well. They do form those study groups often very early on during orientation in the fall semester. And many times those study groups will continue on throughout their law school career if they're in the same courses. And then also through the various organizations that we have here, whether it's journals or Board of Barristers, law fraternities, whatever it may be, you further those friendships. And so I think, although people are competitive, because again, it's law school, I think that the friendships that are formed here at Texas Tech are probably more lifelong friendships than you may encounter at other law schools.
Lots of nods. I see lots of yes.
What she said.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really interesting point, because it's, and I'll talk about this a little later at some point, but location's a big issue for law students, for you guys, and it's a question I get all the time, right? Like Lubbock, but it's Lubbock. It's all the way out here and that kind of stuff. But there's some positive things that are not as apparent. I think that's one of them. That there's most of the folks in the class are not from here. They don't have family in the area. They don't already have a friend network here, and I think that is why the classes end up being so close, because they hang out.
Well,
together.
I think you're right about that. There is a real culture here of the school as a whole. It's not necessarily just about you, right? Every time one of the one of our national teams wins a moot court competition, the banner that goes up isn't, hey, these particular people won, it's another tech law win. And there really is a culture of the school as a whole, and a success for one person at tech is a success for all of us. And that, I think that's true of the faculty. I think that's true of the students, and at least from the alumni that I've met, they're really loyal and they really care about tech as a whole, and they really identify with it. And I think that partly is location. We're kind of far away from everybody, and that means that we're a little bit more of a tight-knit group, and I think that's probably true. To answer your other question about study groups and looking into study groups, partly it's going to be your own comfort level. I definitely studied with people when I was a 1L, and I probably learned more law from Molly Thomas Jensen than I did from any of my professors. But find some people you're comfortable with, and find the group size that you're comfortable with. I actually just picked my study group. We started off as like 4 or 6 or something, but eventually it just became 1-on-1 because that's just what I was comfortable with. So find a group size that you're comfortable with, and if you aren't gelling with one group, it's not personal, it's just maybe you're thinking about the law in a different way, or you just study in a different way. So definitely study with somebody, at least one other person, because law is a social endeavor, not just when you're here, but when you graduate. Find somebody that you can study with, or a couple of people that you can study with that works for you. And if it's not working for you, it's not a personal thing, just try to find some other people and try to do that as early as possible, because the earlier you're discussing the cases, the earlier you're talking about this out loud with people, the faster you realize what you do and don't know. And of course, if you can find somebody smarter than you to study with, that's always better.
Yeah, actually, no joke. I got that advice when I was in law school. Study with people smarter than you, and I only did it once because there was a lot of people smarter than me, and I didn't learn that. But that one class, I did a lot better than any of my other classes, and it was a situation where, like, so they were talking about on the final and the difference between the A paper and the B paper and the nuance and all that kind of stuff, right? We did like a practice exam, and my attitude towards practice exams was always, well, I don't even want to take the real exam. Why would I take a practice exam? Like, that didn't make any sense to me. And, but apparently that's what you do when you want to get good grades. And so we did this in this study group, and then we got around and shared the answers, and I had my sheet that had, like, I would charitably call them rough outlines of answers, like not really like fully written out answers. And so we got around, we were just like, okay, well, what'd you get? And somebody, a couple people would go like, oh, I got like, 0.1, 2, 4, and that kind of stuff. And I looked at my sheet, and I had, and this other guy went who was like really, really smart, and he had like 10 points that he had seen. 1, 2, 3, like all these things. And I looked at mine, and I had like 2, 4, half of 6, like, and it turned a switch. It was like, okay, this is how really smart people see the world, like see the test, and I wasn't seeing it that way. Once I saw it that way, I'm like, oh, that's what you want me to do? Okay, like I can do that. But it just didn't click with me, because I was kind of like we were talking about earlier, I did pretty well in college and without really having to study, and like,
So I'm the type of student who already feels pretty married to the type of law that I would like to practice. I'm a clinical social worker, so I feel pretty committed to public interest law. How do you feel like the curriculum at Texas Tech prepares you for, say, civil rights, for prisoners' rights, for violence against women, for public interest law?
You stumped the professors. Good job.
We all look at each other. I think when you look at our curriculum here at Texas Tech, of course, all first years take the same courses, and then you have required courses, and then you have choices to make that you can cater towards what you think you're interested in. I do encourage everyone, however, to take courses that you maybe don't fit into that mold, because you may actually discover that you're interested in something other than you think you're interested in. And that is not just with courses, but let's say you don't think you want to do mock trial, and then you want to try it, and then you discover a skill that you didn't know you have. But I think that our core curriculum here really prepares you for any type of law that you want to go into. Because if a law school doesn't have a large number of courses in one particular area of law, it really goes back to more of the fundamentals. Is the law school preparing you to think like a lawyer, to act like a lawyer, and to be a lawyer? And I think when you look at our core curriculum here and the electives that we have to offer, whether you're interested in going into public interest or criminal defense law or whatever it may be, you're going to get those skills at Texas Tech.
I would add two things. I think that we have a very comprehensive curriculum. I think that we offer all of the classes that you would see really at any other major law school. Additionally, there's always the opportunity to work with professors through independent studies or through being a research assistant. I know that I'm thrilled when students approach me and are interested in working on something that I'm working on. And so if you wanted to develop an independent study about a specific legal issue that's so specific that we don't offer a course in it, that opportunity is going to be there for you. I would be shocked if you couldn't find somebody in the faculty willing to engage with you at that level. And secondly, I would just echo what Wendy said, which is that a huge number of people come into law school feeling very strongly about what they want to do, and 95% of those people wind up doing something else. And that's perfectly okay. It's really difficult to know what you want to do. You haven't been exposed to enough law. And even really after law school, after you've completed law school, it's really difficult to know what you wanted to do. So when I was in practice, I wound up practicing an area of law that I ran screaming from when I was in law school. And it turned out it was great. The realities of practicing were very different than the realities of studying that area of law. And so I also encourage students who really think that they know what they want to do to take a diverse array of classes, because there are things like food law or cosmetics law that people don't even realize exist, right? That are new and exciting areas. And it would be a shame if you came to law school with such intense blinders on that you missed other areas that might be a real passion for you.
Yeah, I think sometimes students, it's like overestimate how much law they're going to learn in law school, which, a lot of it is it's on the job. You learn, you can't learn everything there is about, for instance, Lee was here earlier, elder law. You have the elder law class, you're not going to learn sort of everything you need to know about elder law in that class. You're going to learn it being an elder law attorney. That's why they're talking about skills, because if you have skills, you can take those skills from corporate to nonprofit. A lot of folks, even if you work at a big firm, you can have pro bono hours on the side. And so you've got these other cases that are not related to your sort of full-time job, but you're still, helping people on the side doing family law or things that need to be helped. So if you have those skills, though, you can take them. You'll find that people jump from career to career, kind of move around. They might do criminal defense, then they would be a prosecutor and like that kind of stuff. The literal answer to your question, there's also the clinic, third-year clinic, which every law school has a clinic, right? And so ours are do have some special ones. You heard about the public defense clinic and that kind of stuff. But that's essentially a fully functioning law firm that does nothing but pro bono in every law school. And so that's a really great, if that's what you're into, you'll want to get into that right away, because you're going to have folks that can't afford legal representation that need help, right? So there's a lot of opportunity to feel good in that.
And law school is not like college. You don't have to major in something in law school. You can certainly take a concentration or a certificate program, but if you're somebody who truly doesn't know what they want to do, you just like studying law, all the power to you. You can go through law school and be an incredibly competent attorney without specializing your second year of law school or something like that.
And to answer your question directly, if you want to do exactly that, we do have some clinics that would be focused on those areas. And also, I don't know, you've probably heard about the regional externship program, and you can get a placement in something like KIND, which is Kids in Need of Defense and that sort of thing, which would be specific to those.
How competitive are the clinics to get into? Because I've looked into them on the website, and some only take 12 students, some only take, X number. So how competitive really are they for each field, like criminal, public, the pro bono clinic, and all that?
I don't know that anybody, you don't actually have a clinical professor. Yeah, I can say that, I've talked to the folks in the clinic, and they're very proud of the fact that nobody has ever been turned away from the clinic that wants to do a clinic experience. They might not be able to do specifically the one that they want, but they are very dedicated to getting you a case and helping you get in there. And it's usually a semester thing, because it is a class. It's not like a full-time thing. It's a class, so you take it for a number of hours, so you could do it maybe in the fall, and then in the spring get into the one that you want and that kind of stuff. So on your exams, when you're grading these exams, what are the things that the sort of best exams have in common, and maybe what are some of the things that the worst exams have in common?
For me, the best exams are the ones that, first of all, answer the question. Which is actually harder than you
Golden
think it
nuggets
is.
of knowledge.
It's
that you're
actually harder
getting
than you think it is because a lot of fact settings could raise a whole bunch of issues. But for me, the call of the question is, tell me about this particular piece of it. And so the best of them are the ones who start by focusing on that. The ones, of course, who get the law right, but I think most people here would think that's a much larger percentage of the grade than it is. Yes, the law today as it is important to know. But the ones I think that do the best are the ones that take a step back and tell me whether they think the law as it is today is the right social policy. And we spend a lot of time, at least in my classes, and I suspect my colleagues too, talking about, okay, do you have the rule here? Do you have it down? Yes, no, here's how it works. There you go. Is this the right social choice? Should we be making a different choice? How about this? How about that? And the ones that do the best in my class are the people who can take a step back and saying, yes, this is the right result. I'm happy about it. No, this result is terrible. I'm sorry, this is the result we have to get to.
I don't have traditional exams in legal practice, but in the realm of legal writing, you'll learn that legal writing is a very structured, specific type of writing where you first explain the law and then you apply it. And it's when you're applying it that you really illustrate to me that you have legal analysis skills. And the people that do better in their either memorandums or persuasive briefs are those that truly walk through the audience, whether it would be a supervising attorney or a judge or panel of judges, walk them through it in a clear, concise manner that connect the dots for the reader. It's supposed to be easy to understand when someone that doesn't know anything about the case picks it up and reads it. And so those that aren't so conclusory with their statements, but truly walk through step A, step B, step C, and not assuming that the reader understands something, really does a better job at legal analysis and tends to do better in my class.
I agree with both. I think that there's a level of subtlety, nuance, and application in A exams that is not present in B exams. In law school, the undergraduate type of exam approach doesn't work. I assume that you know the law when you take my exam. And so if you just spout back at me the rules and the exceptions, that'll get you a strong C, but nothing more. What I want to see is, can you actually apply the law? Can you look at a set of novel facts and spot all of the little nuances that may be legally significant? And more importantly, is your understanding of law so good that you can operate strategically, that you can begin to pick out these nuances and use them towards making a strong argument in this direction? And can you also recognize what your opponent is going to say and anticipate responses to that? So, like I said, I think most professors assume that you know the material. We want to see if you can apply it in a novel situation.
I definitely want to agree with the last thing. It's just that I think every professor will tell you that no, they don't write a fact pattern where it's just, was there a gift here, yes or no? And the answer is just yes. Right? We often write fact patterns, we always write fact patterns, where you could argue it from both sides, right? Because those are the things that end up being cases, right? If the law is super clear on one way or the other, the thing doesn't end up in front of a judge. You just say, yeah, this is the way the law is. And so we will write fact patterns so that there are arguments for both sides. A will argue that this is a gift because of this and this and this. And you have to start with, what are the elements of a gift, right? What does it take to actually but that's sort of your C answer, like, okay, these are your elements of gift, but who can argue the best around, okay, A is going to say that this element is satisfied, but B is going to say it's not because of this, and the best answers, recognize and see the law as more subtle or more gray, right? This is, the joke they tell about lawyers, right? You only want a lawyer with one hand because they're always saying on one hand and then on the other hand, right? But we want you to do that, right? That's part of the thinking like a lawyer bit, and if you can recognize that and display that skill on the exam because you have already marinated yourself in the law so much that you can now apply it to new fact situations and see the subtleties, that's what makes you an A student versus a B student versus a C student.
Sorry. How does a student act inside the classroom and outside the classroom that's just successful, like a relationship with y'all and with their students and peers?
So clearly the most successful student is one that hangs on my every word and pays no attention to anything else. And I mean, there is some of that, like paying attention in class does make a difference. I do find that the students that are not paying attention in class don't necessarily do that well. I do want people to be engaged in the classroom. I spend a lot of time, I don't do sort of the traditional Socratic method as much. I do a lot of, talk about this problem with your partner. Think of, I'll pose a question at the end of class to think about to answer the next time. So the people that really engage with the material obviously do the best. I feel like undergrad, at least my experience with undergrad, was very much like, okay, the professor is just going to send a bunch of information your way, you're going to write all of it down, and then on the exam, you're just going to regurgitate it back on the exam. That was at least my experience with a lot of my classes, maybe not my engineering classes, but a lot of my classes were like that in undergrad. And so law school is very different in the sense that you do have to engage, right? You have to think about, they're going to ask you questions, and you're going to actually have to think about the questions. And even if you're not the one on call, even if I'm calling on the student next to you with a student across the room, and I'm asking them a question, are you still listening to what that question is and thinking, oh, what is my answer? And is that student's answer the same as my answer? Is it different than my answer? You're constantly trying to engage in this dialogue that is the law. And then on top of that, and I think it's particularly a lot easier here than it was maybe at my law school or some of the other law schools, is if you don't understand something, that is fine. That is, expected, right? We spend a lot of time, with new stuff. And so if you don't understand something, one of the things I'd love to see is students come into my office. If I'm there, my door is open, and I'm happy to always take, students are my number one priority, so it doesn't matter if I'm on email or whatever it is. Come on and ask me a question. Is there some note that you saw after the case that you didn't understand, and you talked about it with your fellow students and you didn't understand? Come on in and talk to me about it. And some of my best students, in terms of grades, are the ones that were always in my office asking me kind of, hey, I don't understand this questions, because they took the time to really understand it. And those are the students that also, just so you know, are the ones I remember the best. And so when they come 2L or 3L year and say, hey, can I get a letter of recommendation? Can I get a reference? Can I use you to advance my career in some way? Those are the ones I'm going to say, in addition to being a good student in the classroom, Miss X or Mr. X came into my office and would discuss the law with me and ask questions about what they didn't understand, things that employers like to see that, oh yeah, they actually spend time engaging and that they are good employees in some sense because they really try to understand assignments, etc.
I agree. I think that the brilliance can get you through undergrad, right? I think that probably a lot of people are smart people and don't work very hard as an undergraduate. Don't tell my parents that was true of me. I would crack a book the week before the final and be fine, right? And that's probably true for a lot of you as well. I won't ask you to raise hands because your parents are here. Brilliance will not get you good grades in law school. In my experience, the sole difference between good and bad students is just a matter of discipline. And so that's true inside and outside the classroom. Are you going to be disciplined and paying attention in the class? Or are you going to be texting and on your computer? Are you going to be disciplined and getting the work done or not? I mean, that's really the biggest difference in my mind. And I think in terms of engaging with law professors, my assumption is that my students are all adults. And so I don't do a lot of hand-holding or worrying like I did about undergraduates. I assume that things are okay unless you let me know otherwise, but that means that you have to let me know otherwise. And so my door is always open, and unless people are coming and taking advantage of that, it's hard for me to know sometimes whether or not somebody is struggling. So for me, my door is open. I hold office hours by Skype on the weekends. If there's a quiz coming up, I give students my phone number. I am as accessible as I can possibly be, but it's a relationship, right? Students have to take advantage of that in order to build a relationship with me or to let me know when they need help.
I think there's a couple of things. One is I agree with really what Tracy said really at the very beginning of this, and that is treat it like a job. An undergraduate, you don't really treat your education like a job. And the one piece of advice I always give people coming into law school is whatever else you do, don't get behind in the reading. The rest of it you can fix. If you get a day behind in the reading, you are sunk. So, and you won't know it until you get there, so don't do that. The other thing, so treat it like a job, just as Tracy says. The other thing I think that is a difference that people need to remember is at the undergraduate level, at sort of the graduate level too, you're getting your education for you and what do you want to do, how do you become yourself. This is a professional school. You'll have clients. Your education, the way you serve your clients, your ability to do your job to help others who can't help themselves, depend on what you do here.
in building upon what Eric has just mentioned, because we are preparing you to be a professional practicing attorney, really part of what we're doing here is bridging that gap between undergraduate school and the expectations there and what will be expected of you as an attorney. So one thing in my legal practice class, part of your semester grade is actually based upon professionalism. And so showing up on time, not having your phone out during class when you should be attentive. It's not that I say something if you walk in late, I just make a notation and you get a professionalism deduction. If you turn in a paper, and I do all mine electronically, if it's 1 second late, it's late and it's 5% off your raw score. I have very close friends that teach in the undergraduate programs here at Tech, and I feel like there's a lot of exceptions. Oh, well, you can turn this in, and it's all this. I mean, you can still turn it in, but you get deductions here, and I think that that's part of my job is to help you become and realize what will be expected of you as a professional attorney, and we try to mimic those things in legal practice. On a personal level, part of it, I teach really small classes, 2 sections of 20 students, and because I have them all year, I form a really close relationship with each student. And if I do see a pattern of behavior that I feel like, oh, that these things have been late this number of times, I will call students in and just see if there is something going on. I want students to feel very comfortable with being open and frank with me, and maybe I'm a little paternal in that sense with my students, but I want them to be secure here as part of the Tech family. So willing to help students in any way that I can. I am partially career services because I'll look at resumes and cover letters, and I know that my colleagues do that as well. If there's just something that's going wrong in life, they come talk to me. I have the tissues there. We cover all that. And if I know someone, in the Collin County DA's office, I had a student in my office just yesterday. They know they want to get a job there in the summer, and I happen to know one of the prosecutors there in the felony division. And you make those calls and those connections, and I think we all go above and beyond to form those relationships and to really help our students get to where they want to be.
Good afternoon. Actually, I have two. Hopefully, they're really quick. The first one is, I know a lot of you guys have end of semester exams, but how do you gauge success throughout the semester? And the second question is, what percentage of professors are doing independent research, and how do they balance, and how much time does that take out of teaching and kind of being committed to students?
That's a pretty good question. So the first question is actually kind of like, without quizzes and stuff, how do you know you're getting it? I think that's a really good question.
So I have quizzes in my classes to let students know how they're doing. So you have grades coming in. And as for your second, I think every professor is doing independent research. That's one of the requirements of being a professor. We're expected to publish and to have novel research coming out. And so I would assume that everybody on the faculty is doing that. And balancing those two, balancing teaching and research, is sort of the big open question as a professor. And so some weeks, 95% of what I'm doing is student focused. If it's the week before finals, you can bet that 99% of what I'm doing is working with students and answering last minute questions and having review sessions and Skyping with students who are freaking out at 11 o'clock at night. But then during the slower parts of the semester, when where there's not a quiz coming up, then I turn my focus to my research and to my writing. So it sort of ebbs and flows. But if you have the secret of balance in life, you should come up after the panel and let me know, because that would be helpful.
I think that covers it.
What about,
right?
what about if you don't have quizzes?
Right, if you don't have quiz, right? So obviously, at least, I feel like every professor is doing something during the class, even the very traditional end of year exams, to help you gauge your own learning. So a couple things that I do is I put up old exams, online, old midterms, whatever it is that I have, anything that I've written that basically says this is the way I test, because I don't want anybody walking in to the exam, and I don't think any professor wants you to walk in and say, oh, this is a complete surprise. I have no idea how that this was the way I was going to be tested. So I put all of my old exams up there, and I tell students, here's the exam. For some of them, I have sample answers. For some of them, I don't. And if you want to write one of those exams and come in and talk to me, I'm happy to go through line by line about here's how you can do better, here's how you can actually improve, because I want students to come in prepared. So definitely, spending time on those things are going to be helpful. And the other thing is, I mentioned this, being engaged in class. Are you answering the questions that the professor is asking? Are you understanding the notes after the cases? When I ask you to discuss in groups, are you the one that's always like, I don't know? Or are you the one that's helping contribute to the group's understanding? That's another good way of just gauging yourself with your fellow students. And then to circle back to what we were talking about before about studying together, getting together in groups and gauging your understanding with other students is also another good way of doing that.
I'm pretty Socratic, and I give an exam at the end of the course, and I think most of the ways that the students get some feedback is exactly as Rishi was saying, is either when I'm chatting with you, you'll have a sense of where you're going, but if I'm chatting with someone else, don't tune out. It's not that, oh, gee, you didn't get called on, guess I'll Facebook. It's how would I have answered this? Has this person got it there? Do they not? How is the prof going? Do they think they're moving in the right direction? So I think there's an awful lot of self-assessment that brings you along more than direct feedback from the prof, frankly.
Yeah, I think one of the functions of the getting called on and standing up and that kind of stuff, it's not just pure masochism on the parts of the professors and it's just fun, right? A perk of being a professor. It's to make sure you're doing the reading and you're getting after it. And so even though you're not getting called on, you got to be answering the question yourself and like, oh, did I get it right? Like, would I have known that question if they had asked me? And that kind of stuff. So that's a good place to end. Thank you. Join me in thanking the panel, especially.
Thank you.